Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Cyber Talk. So the topic of my presentation is how to stop going bust using cybersecurity. It's a bit ambitious, but essentially I want to go ahead and cover three key things within my presentation. The first one is to show you that cybersecurity and cybercrime is serious, it's a business, and people are making a lot of money out there. So it's no longer some kid sitting somewhere trying to throw some attacks and for the fun of it. This is now a serious business, right? And hopefully I'll be able to show you some of that along the line. Also, people have systems. They have products, they have solutions in place, but yet, you've seen British Airways, you've seen a lot of the big companies still being hacked. So what is going on, right? It's not a lack of systems. They have system in place. So I'm going to share with you my own experience in terms of the challenges that some of these CISOs, head of security, CIOs have in terms of defending their own systems out there, right? It's not a small task. It's fairly challenging. And then finally, if I can have you to take something away, right, something practical that you as individual can do or as a business, I'm going to be sharing some of the tips towards the end, right? Something that you can start doing today to be able to protect yourself against cybercrime. So, in summary, can you go bust because of cyber attacks, right? Hopefully I'll be able to show you that this is now serious enough whereby government and institutions potentially be taken down, right? We're not far, and I'm going to show you some example of what's been happening for the last year or so. Who's doing the hacking? I get that question quite a lot, right? Who are the hackers? So I'll be able to share some insight as we go along. And there's also a lot of talk about digital transformation, right? We can't really have a digital transformation unless you have a secure infrastructure, right? We're going to talk about that digital transformation a little bit further down the line. And also, I talk to a lot of executives. There's no way to hide, right? Whether you've got a small business, a big business, government, if you have data, they will come, right? Expect them to be knocking on the door, right? And I'll be able to share also some insight on that. So to dive into something a little bit more technical, but not too technical, I'll be able to show you the type of cyber defense architecture that a lot of the banks, the governments have in place today, to be able to defend. And we're going to be able to see what is wrong with some of those, right? In terms of the weaknesses in some of those systems. Again, this is obviously speaking from experience, being able to designing, deploying, and troubleshooting some of these systems. Then we'll look into the what I call complete and a holistic approach to security, in a sense that how do we go ahead and bring all these vendors, all these systems working together for a much more comprehensive type of defense, right? We're going to talk about that, and I'll be able to share some of the things that we're doing with our clients. And then finally, I already mentioned some of the practical steps that one thing that you can do today, as you leave this talk, you can start doing that straight away if you're not already doing that. So, my background, network and security as an engineer, as a consultant, and also a solution architect, now obviously founder and leader of the our cybersecurity group. So I've been working within the space, like I said, as a doer, also as a designer, and also as a troubleshooter, right? I love to get called when things are still good, but a lot of the time I get called when someone has already been compromised and I have to go and do the cleanup or find out what's happening, right? So that's kind of more or less my own experience. So if you were to ask me three things: fast, secure, and available, right? Those three words that essentially I take to clients. They want to make sure whatever system they have, maximum performance, always on, and also obviously secure. Right? Because if you have security without availability, you've got no system. If you have a system that's available, not secure, it's almost as if you've got nothing. So the three, speed, security, and availability, work hand in hand, right? To be able to give you that online presence. So I'm going to skip some of the clients we work with, but let's get started with this. When I was at university, when I did my first hacking course, there used to be a rule that you do not attack government systems and you do not attack, for example, military system, right? So there was a lot of respect when it comes to hacking. You stayed away from military, you stay away from government. But what we're learning today is that the cyber criminals is going to go beyond and above that, right? People are running businesses, right? People are running enterprises. They are making money out of it. Therefore, they are going for everything they can find. Essentially, data is the new oil. If you have data as an individual, as an enterprise, people will come to take it because it's worth money. So we're going beyond just, like I said, little script kiddies. We're now going to enterprise type of businesses in the context of cybercrime. And I'll be able to share some figures. So you can see here, for example, on the screen, a city, Atlanta City, a government in the US, complete shutdown, right? Where we had a number of systems essentially crippled, and they had to pay, or at least they had a ransom to be able to pay a lot of money to be able to release those systems. Imagine if this was done at the complete government level, right? Where you have an entire system, no one can access, and that's it, the government is completely shut down for a day. We are not far from this, right? This is just small examples of much more, I would say, contained type of attacks, but we can now think about how this could be done in a much more bigger scale, right? So you can see governments are being hit. And universities are also being hit. The point I'm trying to show you is no one is really safe, right? There's no respect out there. If you have data, they will come. Universities have been hit. And you also have military have been hit, right? You think they will have a very sophisticated and challenging systems, but they're also being hacked. The message here is it doesn't really matter, right? If you have your system connected to the internet, right, you are vulnerable, and people with enough time, enough money, they will find a way to compromise, okay? So the question is really is not if that will happen, essentially is when. So the question is, how do we prepare? How do we have the right procedures, the right process in place so that if that happens, you can at least recover faster and get back to business in a much more quicker way, right? This is getting a lot more serious. You can see here we have the NHS had an incident, the ransomware attack. But the point is, this could have caused loss of life. Who knows? Maybe some people die because of this. So again, I'm coming back to the point where we are facing cyber criminals who would do anything to make money, including attacking hospitals. Again, there used to be rules. You stay away from hospital systems because there's a chance that hacking could cause loss of life. But you can see here, by the increase of the attack in terms of hospital and healthcare organization, there is no more boundaries, right? So anything that is essentially reachable via the internet could potentially be compromised, okay? Now, this is just another example. I'm going to skip that. But the point I'm trying to say here is there is someone out there paying, right? Because all these hacking, all these attacks, people are paying, and it's costing real dollars to businesses. For example, you can see on the screen there, we have 3.6 million, which is the average cost of a breach. It's quite a lot of money, right, that businesses have to find. And globally, we're talking about okay. So globally, we're talking about 4 billion. That's just an estimate, right? And very conservative. This is from CNBC. People reckon this is actually a lot worse. So we are talking about a lot of money, right? And if I was a criminal, 4 billion a year in terms of estimated cost, I could run a real business, out of this as a criminal, right? I can even reinvest, the proceeds of my profit into hiring people who are qualified, in people who are trained, develop more malware. We are talking about a real enterprise and a real industry here, right? Now, you can even see how hacking is affecting a lot of the deals. So having a strong cybersecurity posture is no longer something nice to have. You can see here, for example, the recent deal between Yahoo and Verizon, where they had a haircut of more than 350 million because they have been able to prove that Yahoo was essentially breached and they didn't have enough a strong defense, right? So Verizon used that as an excuse to say, hey, we want a 350 million haircut to be able to justify because you're not, secure enough. So security becomes not a nice to have, but it becomes a must, right, in a way of doing business, okay? So as an executive or as a leader, we're not talking about something nice to have. It is something that must be at the forefront and must be absolutely taken seriously. Now, the game is changing slightly in a sense that as a business owner, as a C exec, and so on. We now have a new law that has come into place called GDPR. So which means a lot of the alerts, a lot of the notification that we used to have used to be kind of kept a bit secret, right? No one really knows what's happening. But you can see now that within your BBC News feed every day, we have a major breach going on because some of these companies now have the duty to essentially report if they've been breached or not. So we will expect to see a lot more breaches, to be publicized, and to be expecting to see a lot more information about what's happening in terms of cyber attacks, right? So we are talking about, for example, a GDPR, a fine up to 20 million or 4% of your company turnover. Now, I know obviously this is a big number that everyone talks about, but there's a lot more serious stuff. But this is enough to scare, any business owner or any business executive, in the sense that a 20 million fine for plus 4% of your revenue, you're going to be taking notice, right, in terms of the potential impact of a cyber attack. So, who's doing the hacking? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and spread some different type of areas there. From my experience, we have a lot of. I know this is not talked quite a lot, but nation states. I attend quite a lot of the cyber intelligence conference around Europe, but I can tell you, every country, or at least the major developed countries, they're all getting involved into some sort of hacking. I mean, you can call it hacking in brackets in a good way or the bad way, but the reality is nation states, they need to have that capability to get the information they need, whether legally or illegally. So that's certainly happening at the nation state level. Don't want to go too much into details. Cyber criminals, definitely. I've already mentioned that this is an enterprise. People are making a lot of money out of it. And they're also reinvesting that money back into developing more malware and much more sophisticated tools, to the point where we even have ransomware campaigns where you get hit from ransomware, and then someone will be on the phone to say, hey, I can take you through the procedure to pay the ransom, right? It's a totally friendly support, excellent service, and obviously they go ahead and extract your money out of your account. So we are not talking about something on the side anymore. We are talking about properly organized and the means to make a lot of money, right? And more people are getting involved. Then we also have industrial espionage, as you'll expect. A lot of companies now have the information online, so a lot of data, a lot of trade secrets. Therefore, you'll expect that competition, in a good or bad way, they will be wanting to find out what's happening. I know we always have two big countries that we tend to point the fingers, China and Russia, in terms of the most active in terms of industrial espionage. But again, there's a lot of stuff out there that you can read on it in terms of that side. But I'll probably say organized crime is something that is a lot more worrying, right? Because these guys are doing it for money. They have the tools, they have the expertise, and they have the means to potentially pay people double the rate, right, to do these things. So that essentially was a lot, for me, a lot worrying, because they are going after everything that they can get their hands on. Personal data, enterprise data, doesn't matter, right? It's worth money, we can sell it, we can share it, we can do all sort of things. And obviously, I've kind of left there as script kiddies. So there are still some young kids out there. You will have seen the TalkTalk attack, where 13-year-old managed to compromise the system to steal some data. But I say there's still some of that going on. But I'll say a lot of it is a lot more organized and a lot more structured. Okay? And obviously, insider threats. So don't forget, within your company, a lot of the threats essentially coming within employees that are already sitting in your company with the right administrative level or the right type of permissions to be able to essentially cause a lot of damage, right? So that's something that's always a bit underestimated in terms of insider threats. And then finally, cyber weapons testing. This is something that I was on another conference in Eastern Europe recently, whereby there are a lot of testing going on. And you can imagine within the geopolitical space where a lot of the major countries are building what we call cyber weapons. And it's not too far-fetched because conventional warfare is now moving from the standard battlefields to also what we call cyber warfare, right? So you'll expect a lot of these major countries building these cyber weapons where they can press one button and essentially wipe out your entire internet infrastructure. So you'll expect that a lot of countries will be essentially arming themselves against this. And we will have seen some of the testing ground in Ukraine, for example. You know, if you read a lot of the report from a lot of the vendors, where we think Ukraine essentially is one of the testing ground for a lot of these cyber weapons, right? In the sense that they will throw something, see how people react, and then essentially to be able to learn how the ability for countries or system to cope with those type of attacks, yeah? So there are probably a lot more, but these are by far the most obvious. And also what we call hacktivists, right? There are people out there like anonymous group who want to make a point, not necessarily for profit, but they have the means, the expertise to essentially cause embarrassment, damage to a specific company or enterprise or government systems, right? So you see here that cybersecurity, and these are complete different, essentially threat actors, different motives, and you definitely don't want to get caught, right, as a company, as an individual, onto one of these, right? Because that's your data stolen, your company suffers a breach, and obviously that's not very nice and pretty, okay? So it is serious business. That's the point I'm trying to make. Now, from my experience, working with a lot of companies, I'm designing systems and also helping to defend in a much more comprehensive. We kind of build a product, a platform that allows you to bring all your security infrastructure together, and it gives you that single pane of glass visibility across your entire infrastructure. Now, we work with a lot of clients. We look at this, and I can tell you it's relentless, right? We look at the system being put online, and instantly we can see all type of threats coming from, you know, all over the place, yeah? Local, global, you know, and so on. So the point I'm trying to make here is it's not just a nice to have in the context of security. This is going on all the time, 24/7. If you have any system that is available on the internet, people will come knocking on the door, right? You can assume you might even already been hacked, right? That's how challenging this is. So I come back to digital transformation, which is quite a big word, yeah? We are moving to a point where everything is moving to a digital space. Our personal data, enterprise data, everything is moving to the cloud. So there's that blur in terms of the physical and the virtual world. Obviously, this brings a lot of challenges and dangers because the more data we put out there in terms of your own personal data or enterprise data, it comes with the challenge of having to protect it and having to defend it in terms of cyber attacks. But more and more, since we're moving away from the paper-based type of data to much more digital, this is going to get a lot challenging and a lot worse, right? Where we have individuals, we have governments, we have mass communications, healthcare, all the data is out there on the internet, and we need to find a way to protect it and to defend. So digital transformation really comes also with quite a big cost when it comes to defending your infrastructure and your data, right? So my view, you can't really talk about digital transformation unless you come back to those three words, right? We need an infrastructure that's very fast. We need an infrastructure that's very secure and also highly available. Again, it comes to those three, yeah? If you don't have availability, then people don't really care about how fast your security is, right? If it's not fast, right, then people will just give up and stop using it. And if it's not secure, guess what? People will just go away. So these three things keep coming back in the context of digital transformation, and security is essentially quite a big deal, right? So I meet a lot of executives, and I'm still quite surprised, you know, when people are still saying to me, well, there is nothing we can do, right? We can just hide on the corner. No one will come after us, you know. We have no valuable data to protect, so therefore we don't need security, right? So we have no enemies. We are a nice company. We haven't done anything wrong to anyone, so therefore criminals will leave us alone, right? So therefore, we don't need security, okay? But the reality is, as already said, if you have data, people will come. It's as simple as that. Personal data or enterprise data or government data, people will come for it. So we also have people saying to us, it won't happen to us, right? Because we have no threat actors. We have nothing to worry about, okay? Or nothing to show for, nothing valuable. But that doesn't apply, because I told you already that we are talking about enterprise, organized crime, which are running businesses. They need to make profit. They need to find targets. And once they find targets, they will exploit it. Doesn't matter, regardless, right? There's no discrimination there. We also have people telling us that we have no budget, right? So we have no budget. There's nothing we can do. Therefore, yeah, we're good because you have no money to spend. But guess what? Criminals, they don't check if you have budget or not, right? All they see, if they can target your system, they can come after you, they can come after you, whether you have budget or not. So this is no longer a valid excuse, right? So you need to find a way, even if you're using free tools, open tools, to defend yourself if you have information out there, if you have systems out there facing the internet. It's as simple as that. And we do not have any skills, right? So we're not a security company, we're not security savvy, we don't have any skills, therefore there's nothing that we need to do. Again, all these excuses are irrelevant in the face of the challenges that I've already showed you in terms of cyber criminals and also people coming after your system, right? Okay. Now, if let's talk about fighting back without going too much deep into security. But I want to give you a bit of an insight here, right? So again, those of you not necessarily heavily technical minded, the intention is not to go too deep. But look at this picture here. This is what most government organizations like banks and so on will have. This is very simplified when it comes to, for example, online banking, right? So you go to your online banking, you access your website, you can transfer money, you can do whatever you want. They will usually have an infrastructure looking like this in a very simplified way. So you see at the top, we have internet connectivity, we have a denial of service protection, right, with a box there. We have our firewall, right? We need to have some sort of network firewall to be able to defend. We have some sort of load balancing or intrusion detection system, application delivery controller. But the point is, without going too much into details, companies will have these type of infrastructures. Let's go back. Companies will have this type of infrastructures already in place. Yeah. So you can see this is fairly comprehensive, multi-layers, right? And you can expand this onto something a bit more complicated. And different vendors there, right? I'm just showing whether this is in the cloud or in a physical environment, doesn't really matter. But what's wrong with this? From my experience, is that a lot of these systems work very well as single point products, doing a great job, but you're going to find that the integration usually lacks, right? So they're not really properly integrated. They're not really working together in a way that the bad guys work, right? They share information, they share data, they share threat in terms of attacking systems. So we still have a lot of organization with the technology that they need, but that technology is not really integrated. And in my opinion, this is one of the biggest challenges. We do not have a lack of security technologies. In fact, we have more than enough, and they're very advanced, certainly very powerful. But integration and also the ability to bring all of these systems working as one is a big challenge, right? And this is really where the problem is still happening. So what we really need to think about is, within an infrastructure, all these different vendors, again, very simplified, we need to find a way to have all these systems working better together, right? We're talking about tight integration, exchanging information, exchanging threat, sharing across, not just across different companies, but across, this entire ecosystem, and essentially providing better response, across the board, right? So Gartner, for example, if you're familiar with Gartner, they call it SOAR, Security Orchestration, Automated and Response. This is essentially where a lot of companies, in my opinion, need to focus on, not more solution, not necessarily more vendors, more point solutions, but how do we integrate whatever you've got? How can you make that work better and in a lot more efficient way? Yeah. Ultimately, within that concept, what I've just explained, we're talking about bringing much more holistic and comprehensive approach to security. Yeah, it's not about throwing more vendors, more systems. It's about making sure from training, which is a lot underestimated within the company, wherever you go, your engineers, your employees must have the right training to be able to essentially support your existing infrastructure. Then obviously we back that up with the ability to implement, to troubleshoot, and also to maintain those ongoing systems in a much more integrated way, right? Integration is key. Otherwise, what you end up with is what we have today, a lot of fantastic products scattered across your enterprise. They're not really talking together, right? And visibility across the entire infrastructure is very limited. Therefore, the bad guys know exactly what are the weaknesses and they can exploit it. Yeah, we need that coordination to be able to provide that much more detailed response. So to kind of wrap up my talk, if there is something that you can take away, I already mentioned. First is education and awareness, right? We can't say enough about you educating your team, educating your employees about security, because out of all the things I showed you about system, humans are probably the biggest threat, you know, out of all, right? You can always guarantee there's going to be someone out there that will do something that even no system could have essentially have planned or envisioned. However, you want to be able to think big, start small. So we all carry data, right? So when you think about data, it's not just longer on the enterprise system or in the cloud. You here today with your mobile phone, with your iPhone and so on, you are working data center, right? So you are carrying a lot of personal data that you're beaming across Bluetooth for sharing and so on. Think data and how essentially can I protect it. We also have the ability to do something even with low budgets, right? There are a lot of open tools out there, so it doesn't always have to be expensive. You know, if you care to look, there are, for example, a lot of free tools that are used in terms of two-factor authentication. I'll come back to that. You can essentially have those within your systems without having to pay anything. So it's not always about how much money you're spending. It's just about being aware and having the will to be able to protect, right? So a lot of open source systems are there. But more importantly, at a personal level, my recommendation will be every system you have today, find a way to activate your two-factor authentication, right? Because I can tell you, doing a lot of penetration testing and attack simulation onto a lot of systems, people are still using password to protect even the most sensitive systems. So if there's anything you can do at an individual level, right? I use personally Google Authenticator, which is free. Make sure you have all your systems from email to your portal, obviously bank, they're already doing that. Make sure you use two-factor authentication because that reduces the probability of someone essentially hacking into the system a lot harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it makes life a lot harder, right? So if there's one action you need to take today, make sure you think about two-factor authentication onto all your external systems. And then finally, this is an obvious one. I know you might think this is trivial, but make sure on all your local systems you do have some sort of AV, right? I'm still the support guys in my family, so you'd be amazed how many people I still have to go around and tell them, you got to get your AV up to date, you got to get it installed, you know, get it out there, because that's essentially one line of defense that you cannot really underestimate, right? So two-factor authentication, local AV, and finally, educate your staff, basic principle, right? You have the National Cybersecurity Center. They publish a lot of things every week. You know, read it. Simple things like hygiene. Don't go out and clicking onto links. You know, on the internet, you get an email from a stranger. Happy click. These are still things that we need to go ahead and push across. But my view, two-factor authentication will give you that stronger level of defense that is going to give you that level of protection that will stop a lot of the bad guys away. And that's it, really. Thank you very much.